If you stacked up every dollar from every home sale last year, the Tower of Cash would stand twice as high as the International Space Station orbits the Earth. That's not just a lot of homes changing hands, that's a mountain of money moving through an ever-growing market. But what drives this ascent? Is it just the ebb and flow of the economy, or could it be something more orchestrated? I'm here to take you on a journey through time, to peel back the layers of the housing market and to ask a question that might change the way you look at the for sale signs in your neighborhood. Does the US government have a role in inflating house prices? Home ownership, often coined as the quintessential American dream, isn't just a cultural milestone, it's a financial cornerstone for millions. Yet, as decades pass, that corner seems to edge further away from many, with prices climbing faster than a kid up a backyard tree. This isn't a new phenomenon, nor is it a simple one. History tells us that the dance between home values and the cost of living has its own rhythm. For years, through wars, recessions, and booms, this dance stayed in step. But as the 20th century rolled on, the music began to change. Our quest begins in the post-war glow of the mid-century, a time when GI Bill benefits sparked a surge in home ownership. The economy boomed, and home prices? They gently rose, keeping time with inflation like a slow waltz that promised everyone a chance to lead. Fast forward to the 1970s and the tempo shifts. An orchestra of oil crises, inflation spikes, and policy shifts played a tune that led house prices into a faster dance, often spinning away from the steady steps of inflation. This brings us to our first waypoint, the curious case of the 1970s. Why then did house prices start to tango away from inflation? To answer that, we'll need to look at the policies, the politics, and yes, the government's hand in the housing market cookie jar. But that's just part of our story. As the millennium turned, we saw a housing market sprint like no other, a boom followed by a bust, the likes of which reshaped not just markets but lives and landscapes across the country. Finance first, freedom follows. Welcome back to Think Freedom. Settle in as we unpack this intricate tale. It's a tale of economics, of interest rates and tax codes, of supply, demand, and the sometimes invisible hand that guides them. Together, we'll uncover whether this growth is the result of careful planning, a series of reactions, or perhaps a blend of both. By the end of our time today, we'll have a clearer picture of just how much the government steers the ship we call the housing market. And we might just find out if we're all aboard on a journey by design or drifting on the tides of economic chance. 1 HPI versus CPI, the great divergence. First, let's see the Case-Shiller Home Price Index versus inflation chart from 1890 to the present. Our chart here is more than lines and numbers. It's a narrative. A narrative of American homes and the dollars it takes to open their doors. As we trace the line from the 1940s, we see the post-war housing boom, a time when owning a home became the cornerstone of the American dream. Back then, the government played a matchmaker between Americans and their homes. The GI Bill, VA loans, tools designed to lift the spirits and financial foundations of a country shaking off the dust of war. But as bell-bottoms hit the shelves and disco balls spun, the housing market boogied to a different beat. Inflation reared its head like a monster from a B-movie, and the government? They were quick to respond. Policies rolled out, from interest rate hikes to subsidized housing, all with a goal to tame the beast and keep the American dream alive. But here's where it gets juicy. Each policy, each regulation, each interest rate tweak wove a thread into the fabric of the market. By the time the 80s and tech revolution hit, we had a quilt that was equal parts comfort and complexity. And with complexity comes unpredictability. As the new millennium dawned, unpredictability took center stage. The government's role was both director and supporting actor, promoting home buying, yes, but also inadvertently setting the stage for the greatest financial drama of our generation. Subprime mortgages, lending loopholes, and an all-you-can-eat buffet of credit. The result? House prices didn't just climb. They soared, fueled by a concoction of optimism, deregulation, and an unprecedented flow of capital. Until, like Icarus, the market flew too close to the sun. The crash of 2008 wasn't just a correction, it was a reckoning. And the government's hand in it? That's the billion-dollar question we're here to answer. After the fall, as the dust settled on the housing market's wild ride, a sobering picture emerged. The Case-Shiller Index, which had once traced a steady, predictable path, now looked like a heartbeat monitor during a panic attack. In the aftermath of 2008, house prices plummeted, wiping out trillions in household wealth. The fallout was a stark reminder of the market's volatility and the far-reaching impact of government policy. Let's rewind a bit, shall we? In the early 2000s, the American government, rooted in the belief of home ownership for all, encouraged lending to buyers who had previously been sidelined. Interest rates were low, Credit was easy and the message was clear. Buy a home. It's never been easier. The result? Home ownership rates soared to an all-time high by 2004. But behind these encouraging numbers lay the seeds of a crisis. In the push to widen the home ownership circle, standards loosened. No-doc loans, adjustable-rate mortgages, and a buffet of exotic financial products flooded the market. Banks bundled these risky loans into mortgage-backed securities, sold off to investors hungry for returns. It was a house of cards, and government-sponsored enterprises like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were right in the mix, guaranteeing a massive slice of these mortgages. As prices peaked, the inevitable happened. The bubble burst. Foreclosures skyrocketed. And the government? They stepped in with bailouts for banks and auto companies, but millions of homeowners felt the sting of lost homes and life savings. The recession that followed was the deepest since the Great Depression. The years that followed brought introspection and reform. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 aimed to place tighter controls on the financial industry. Measures were introduced to prevent predatory lending and ensure that buyers could actually afford their loans. Yet, the debate rages on how much regulation is enough and how much is too much. Even today, as we navigate a post-pandemic world, the housing market is hot again. Prices are climbing, and the memories of the last crash are like shadows at a sunny barbecue. The government's role remains significant. Interest rates set by the Federal Reserve are at historic lows, and lending standards, while stricter, still aim to promote buying. So what's the takeaway from this complex tale? Home prices, once a reflection of the economy's health, have become a barometer for government policy efficacy. The push and pull of regulation, intervention, and market freedom continue to shape the American housing landscape. It's a delicate balance, one that requires constant vigilance to maintain. 3. Rising tides. In the wake of the housing crash, the landscape of American homeownership has been irrevocably altered. Home prices, once in free fall, have rebounded, and in some areas they're reaching new heights. This resurgence brings us to a pivotal question. Is the market simply correcting itself, or are we witnessing the government's invisible hand gently, or perhaps not so gently, lifting the scales? Interest rates, the lever of the economic machine controlled by the Federal Reserve, have hovered at historic lows. These rates, a response to the financial crisis intended to stimulate economic growth, have also had the effect of reigniting the housing market. Cheap borrowing costs have opened the floodgates for buyers. But there's a catch. This influx of demand, set against a backdrop of limited housing supply, has led to the price surges we're seeing in cities across the nation. Let's consider the data. Since 2012, housing prices have climbed steadily, outpacing the rate of inflation. The S&P Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index, for instance, shows an increase of over 50% in home prices since that pivotal year. The reasons are multifaceted, but government influence is woven throughout. Zoning laws, touted to preserve community character, often stifle the development of new housing, keeping supply tight. Federal programs like those from the FHA continue to ensure that mortgages are within reach for many, further fueling demand. Tax incentives are another piece of the puzzle. The mortgage interest deduction, a stalwart of the tax code, effectively subsidizes home ownership. It encourages higher spending on housing, which some economists argue translates to higher prices. Critics suggest this well-intentioned policy benefits higher-income homeowners disproportionately and inflates prices across the board. But government influence extends beyond fiscal policy. In the aftermath of the housing crisis, regulations aimed at preventing another meltdown have shaped the market. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, born out of the Dodd-Frank Act, established new lending guidelines designed to protect consumers and the financial system. These rules were crafted to avoid risky loans that contributed to the crisis, but they also tightened the reins on lending, potentially affecting who can afford to buy and, consequently, who can afford to sell. As we stand today, staring at the graph that tracks the rise in home prices against the consistent, slower march of inflation, the intersection of government policy and market forces is clear. What began as a partnership to promote homeownership has become a complex, often controversial, dynamic that plays a significant role in determining the value of the roofs over our heads. So, does the government artificially inflate house prices? The answer is not a simple yes or no. It's a mosaic of yeses and nos, of policies with intended and unintended consequences. The reality is that government actions, while aiming to stabilize and stimulate, do affect the market, sometimes in ways that raise prices beyond what many would expect in a purely supply and demand-driven scenario. 4. The affordability equation. As we turn the page to the current chapter in the story of the American housing market, we're confronted with an ever-pressing issue: housing affordability. The dream of homeownership remains just that, a dream, for an increasing number of Americans. Despite the lessons of the past, today's market challenges are steeped in a brew of high demand, low supply, and prices that continue to climb. Let's look at the numbers. According to recent data, median home prices have surged by over 20% in just a few years, with some regions experiencing even more dramatic spikes. This isn't merely a reflection of desirability or market health. It's a symptom of deeper systemic issues that require nuanced solutions. Government policies, both old and new, play a pivotal role in shaping these outcomes. One such policy is the push for increased home ownership through government-backed loans. Agencies like the Federal Housing Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs offer programs that reduce down payment requirements, making it easier for first-time buyers to enter the market. While well-intentioned, these programs also stoke demand, pushing prices upward in markets already tight on supply. On the supply side, local government regulations on land use and building codes frequently restrict the construction of new housing units. These regulations, often designed to preserve community character or meet environmental objectives, can inadvertently drive up costs by limiting where and what developers can build, thus exacerbating the affordability crisis. The federal government's response to these dynamics has varied. Recent initiatives aim to address this supply bottleneck by incentivizing the construction of affordable housing and loosening zoning laws. However, the effectiveness of these measures is still up for debate. Will they provide the necessary relief, or are they too little, too late? In this complex ecosystem, the question of whether government actions inflate house prices is more relevant than ever. The answer is multifaceted, reflecting the intricate dance between fostering economic growth, ensuring consumer protection, and promoting social welfare through housing policies. As we move forward, it's crucial to monitor how these policies evolve in response to market needs and economic conditions. The goal? To strike a balance that supports sustainable growth, ensures affordability, and avoids the pitfalls of past market cycles. As we wrap up our exploration of the U.S. housing market and the influence of government policies on house prices, it's evident that this is a multifaceted issue. Our journey through history has shown that while government actions aim to stabilize and stimulate the housing market, they can also lead to unintended consequences like price inflation. Looking ahead, achieving a healthy housing market will require a careful balance of policy, market responsiveness, and community engagement. It's crucial for policies to be adaptable, ensuring that they meet the changing needs of the economy and the people they are designed to serve. In the end, the housing market isn't just about numbers and policies, it's about people and their dreams. As we move forward, let's stay informed and engaged, helping to shape a housing market that is accessible and fair for everyone. Keep working towards your financial goals and be kind to the others. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.